Welcome to the Tech Savvy Professor podcast, which features two faculty members who love tech and love making it part of their work. I'm Marty Gencius, a counselor educator at Kent State University.
And I'm Eric Perry, faculty member and program director at Divine Mercy University.
We have been bouncing back and forth ideas for what we think is the start of the semester for everybody. Last show, we talked about video conferencing and how to up your game with video conferencing. And this one, I just thought we'd talk about start of the semester tips, if you want to call it that. So we're going to offer two suggestions in terms of hardware, two suggestions in terms of software, and two suggestions in terms of teaching. These I think are quick. You can pick up. So some of them might be kind of weird in terms of the process. So we thought we would do these tips around hardware, software, and teaching. Some things that you can maybe pick up easily, some things that maybe are specific to situations, but they'll get you to think about it a little bit. Eric, I'm going to let you start with hardware.
All right. So I saw your suggestions and it made me think of some things that may not be the first thing that comes to someone's mind. One of them is kind of one of my favorite things I have in my office right now. It's an atomic wall clock. Sharp makes them. I live by the calendar, and my computer clock is the thing I look at all the time, the bottom right-hand corner and my little time there. But I have my Sharp clock, which is you can get it for $40 on Amazon. The nice part about it is it keeps that atomic specific time. There's a couple of different models. Mine also does the date and adjusts for time zones. So it does it all on its own. A couple of batteries, and it's lasted, I think I've had this one for 3 years or so, but it's a really nice, high quality, well-functioning analog clock that might be helpful just for you to see the time. The numbers are big. It's really good in office space. I suggest, bumping it up to the digital version and getting the atomic version so that it keeps time on its own, which I think is a really cool just addition to the office and a way to keep time without always looking at that little digital thing in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest something that is a little different, and it's specific to a scenario that I'm in, but it might not be unique where it could be applicable to a lot of folks. And I'm going to suggest HDMI extension cords. The HDMI is that cable you use to plug into your laptop in order to do a presentation in the classroom. And one of the problems that we have in most classroom settings is, where's the computer? It's on a desk up in the corner. And that, if you're going to do all your work from that point, then it makes it a little difficult, and it separates you from the class in a lot of ways. So I taught a class last night. I like to, with class sizes around 10 or 12, move the tables from the theater style way that apparently is the only way the College of Education thinks that we have to learn in theater style, and move them into a larger circle. But that meant if I was going to run anything off the computer, I would have to go over to my laptop or go over to the computer to make the adjustments. Instead, and I'll put a link, an Amazon link, and you can choose, there's tons of them out there, but a link to these 10-foot cables, and 10 feet is enough to get me away from the computer desk, the computer kiosk, over to the table that I'm sitting at, so I can sit with students while I'm operating whatever I'm operating. It's a little klutzy to carry around a 10-foot HDMI cable. I keep them up in my office and I bring them down for classes where I know I'm going to need them. I've even gotten two of them, and you can get these little connectors that connect male to male. So they're a little connector. So then you have a 20-foot cable if you want it. And surprisingly enough, students who are doing presentations have picked up on this, and they like the fact that we can use and do our presentations directly from where we're sitting and stay with the group in the process. I don't know, Eric, does that, I'm working at a brick and mortar and you're doing online, but do you get what I'm doing here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I still go in and present. And
Yeah.
sometimes we'll use kind of a traditional classroom space that's set up with a like a desktop or something like that. And it makes sense to have those cords on hand. And we've talked about this before too, that there's great cord organizers out there to help carry things around. And I always
Yeah.
have one or two of those to use for travel. My other suggestion is kind of along the same lines, Marty, and I have been using the same old USB switch for quite some
Hmm.
time. So I have two separate sort of university laptop and my personal laptop that I switch between for certain things. There are really nice ones out now that include USB-C ports to help you a little more easily hook up displays and switch between devices. Anker makes one that's a 7-in-1 and supports that USB-C connection so that you can use a laptop that needs powered and you can keep that 4K resolution between the two devices.
Yeah.
They're small, they're easy to travel with, but just for your home setup, it makes organization easy and you're not unplugging and replugging things in. It's a really cheap way to just avoid kind of trying to work between two devices.
Yeah, I've got one. I've got an Anchor plank, the 7-in-1 plugged in right here in front of me on my desktop
That's
for
awesome. I
that
just ordered
purpose.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
just ordered it.
I've wondered this in terms of these are the one that I have is powered by the output of the Studio Mac that I have. So it plugs into one USB port and then one becomes useful for whatever you want to plug into it. I think I have my printer plugged into it, or I might have my camera plugged into it. And then I think I have some other extension, some other like charging cables that I use for charging phones and other
Mhm.
devices and earbuds. So that's all part of that array that I have. But I also have another one of these ports that's powered, and it's powered for a reason. And so can you talk a little bit if you know the differences between the two?
So it's a powered USB-C.
Well, it's a powered multi-port OWC, I think makes it. Let me see if I can find it.
So your hubs and your KVM switches are a little different. So your KVM switch is going to help you run those multiple devices by switching through, and they're going to have multiple inputs. And then your hub is more your extension for the rest of your devices. So the USB can either be powered or unpowered. So it might need to be plugged in if your USB port's a little bit older or doesn't provide enough power to run that switch. So it'll be powered on its own. And then it's useful for charging devices. There are some of those switches out there, KVM switches or those kind of USB hubs that are not powered. And they're really just for connecting devices, multiple devices, and expanding your kind of USB ports.
Yeah, what I'm looking at is a OWC 14 port Thunderbolt dock. That's a hub that I have that I haven't used yet, but it has plenty of places to plug things in, but it's powered.
Mhm.
It comes with a necessary power source and it has all sorts of charging ports and other things that you can do with it. I'll also put this in all these links in the notes so folks can look at them. But it's heavier. It's a lot heavier than the Anchor, at least the Anchor that I'm using, and it serves a purpose for the multi-port kind of process. I know a lot of people who have laptops and then have multiple displays will use something like this in order to manage the multiple display switching.
Well, and this one, the one you're talking about, the Thunderbolt, has four powered USB
Yeah.
ports, and that's what it needs plugged in for, is so that it can power those four separate ports. Usually, your laptop is going to have maybe one or two powered USB-C ports.
Yeah.
So having that expansion of those there is really helpful for the multiple monitors and for charging devices and that kind of thing. So you'll get fast charging out of it.
Yeah. Well, the OWC I think is more for used from a desktop
Mm-hmm.
perspective versus the Anchor that you're suggesting is really the portable thing you can throw in your bag and take with you and use in a lot of places. I just happen to have one plugged in to my Mac Studio here. So my second hardware piece is a Dino Fire wireless presenter. Kind of goes along with the idea that you want to be you you don't want to be tethered to your laptop or desktop when you're presenting. And so these little things are, they have laser pointers on the end. They're very cheap. They're $15. Frankly, when I have somebody who is co-teaching with me, a doc student for the first time, at the end of the semester, I buy one of these things and I give it to them because I never want to see them not walking around the room and teaching. And, I don't want to see them stuck behind a computer. So the DinoFire wireless presenter, very easy to put in. Out of the bottom comes a little dongle that you stick into your laptop, and then it connects kind of automatically, and it allows you to move through slideshows and PowerPoints. It's a great kind of little device to keep in your hand. And it puts you out in center with your students, which is, I think, really important in terms of the tech.
Yeah, I think it's really neat.
Software, Eric.
Yeah, I was thinking about this one a little bit. So, I don't know how many people are still or have listened to the email episode. That's the one I'd revisit first. I think looking at, what type of email platform you're going to use, and we did a pretty comprehensive review of the ones that are out there. Looking at your alternatives, I still haven't found one I love to combine all the email accounts that I use, particularly Gmail accounts and Outlook. But I've been tinkering around with things. I settled back on Outlook for a minute, and now I'm looking at a
Hmm.
couple of options to try and replace it. So there's a couple of different options out there. I'd suggest going back to our episode and listening to those and seeing what works best for you. But productivity wise, that's the thing that slows me up the most online is answering emails, trying to grade, kind of balancing that, going back and forth between tasks and meetings. If you can find a seamless way to do that, that's the first checkbox that I'd go to.
For me, software that I might have mentioned before in the show, a piece of software called Text Expander. I have been put in the position to do some program coordination, and Eric, you have much more experience doing that than I am, having coordinated and been involved in a lot of programs. This is a first time for me, and I've used Text Expander for years. It is essentially what the title says. And there are a couple of different varieties of these, but I think Text Expander is one of the best. It's $39 a year license. You get a 30-day free trial if you want to use it or try it out. You come up with short codes, basically, that trigger macros or trigger a larger exposition of text. So when I'm writing repetitive emails from people who want to publish their or ask for subjects on my listserv, I don't have to type the same email. I don't have to copy and paste it from a previous email. I have a trigger for that. So Text Expander runs in the background. I have a trigger that's semicolon, whatever. See, you want to select a trigger that's not going to wind up in normal language. So for me, it's a semicolon without a space and then a letter code that I can remember that will trigger a whole email and populate the response within the email. Can be used for grading and repetitive grading when you're giving the same comments over the same assignment to papers. So it's a matter of setting up the macros. I have one for my signatures, although Mail has alternative signatures that you can select from. I have some of these text expander triggers for various email signatures. It's weaved into a lot of the work that I have done, and now I'm getting daily email from students who want to apply from another country, and they get down to the can you provide me an assistantship portion of it, and that's going to be very difficult for us to do. We have limited assistantships in our program. So it's a lot of, generating emails that are thank you for applying. You certainly have some great, interesting qualities, or thank you about thinking of applying. They haven't applied yet. They just want to know if there's the possibility of money there. So, thank you for the for your consideration of application, blah 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 here, and you've done some wonderful stuff. Here's our situation with scholarships, and that can go out, you know very easily with a triggered macro. So that is my first suggestion for software. When I teach college teaching and I teach a section to our doc students on technology applications that are used in teaching, this is something I introduce them to, and their jaws drop. What it's capable of doing and what you can use it for, I think are really good. So Text Expander was my software choice.
Yeah, I've tried out Text Expander. I like it, and it's really good for those repetitive tasks. And it's something I may need to pick up again since I'm going to be doing a little bit more of that in my new role.
Yeah. You
So
can
I
even
think
leave, you can create the macros, you can create the letter with spaces in it that it will ask you to fill in before it populates it. So it's the same letter, but it goes to a different name. There's a name field in there that'll stop and say, put the name in and finish it. So it still looks very personal to the person who's getting it, but it has a lot of options for and pull down menus and things like that that you can do within some of these expanded texts.
I have to give it a shot. My next suggestion around software is one I don't think we've talked about before. I just downloaded a few days ago, so I'm learning a lot as I'm starting into a new program director role. Every university, every program does things differently. I wanted to get away from OneNote, which I've used a lot in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying out a program called Obsidian.
Oh yeah.
So that's one I haven't used before. I've had it recommended, know a couple people who use it. So I've just started to tinker around with it now. And one thing I've noticed about it is it provides some pretty neat suggestions around things. It will link different notes together. And I'll be honest, in learning so much so fast, there's times where I'll repeat myself. I'll take the same note twice, or I'll take notes in a different section around a different topic that connect to another process I'm working on. Right. So I was in a 3-hour training today for budgets. It's exciting. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
had already been in a training for admissions that talked about some of the portions of the budget that link from admissions data. So it kind of connects those things. It has a pretty cool graphing function that I don't have enough data points to really use yet for it to look neat or provide anything helpful. But I think it's just a cool way to organize information. It provides, like I said, some good links between information, which is helpful for me because I can be scattered sometimes. And then operates a lot like OneNote does with those extra features. I haven't tried any of the plugins that are there, but there's an open source community for plugins around it too. So I was looking through those and thinking about bringing in a calendar function, or something else to just tinker around with it. But that note taking thing is pretty big for me, especially in the learning phase where I'm at right now.
Yeah, Obsidian. I went to a conference this summer where a guy did a presentation on Obsidian and have seen it before. I think I even have it loaded on the computer, but it feels like a big learning curve to me. I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a terminology around it that's a little bit different. So when you pull it up and you kind of start into it the first time, it has you create, canvases and create new notes and files, and then you're organizing your system much like you would kind of in your email. But when you start using some of those larger functions, like I said, connecting the notes between each other using the graphing function, there can be some bit of a learning curve. I feel like, I don't know, but it's kind of exciting for me. I like that part of it.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the extra time, it's not a quick thing to jump into, but I'm hoping it pays off.
Yeah, I've seen some things that were, what's better here, Notion or Obsidian, and Notion being an alternative to the option to Obsidian. And I've played with Notion trying to figure out how to make it work for me and have just haven't had the time to dig into either one to any great depth. And to the degree that I need to have all of that stuff connected, I'm not sure I do. But a lot of people love both Obsidian and also Notion. I really, really wanted to try and get to understand Notion because that seems to be the hot product right now in terms of it. But its interface is not as intuitive as I would hope it would be with that. My software selection, ChatGPT. I know that's going to get me in a lot of trouble. People will get upset, but frankly, I'm not using it to write papers, but I am using it for ideas. And even before the show, as we're thinking of ideas, I ran to ChatGPT and put a query in to say, we've got faculty you'll be returning. Come up with some good subject titles for potential podcasts that we can do on returning to the schoolwork. And that's how we kind of generated this topic. I use it for generating a lot of ideas. I use it for generating strategic plans. I use it for generating bylaws. I use it for taking something that I've written and performing some AI on it to make it sound better or give it a different voice. It really, for me, it's not a Google search engine, which is the way a lot of people treat it. It really is an interactive piece of software that can help me expand my thinking and major topics in an area that I'm working at. Universities have some very strong attitudes about using this or not using this. So I think anybody who's thinking of using it has a way to understand your or deepen your thought around an idea. I find that probably safe and ethical versus using it to create content that you're going to be using as part of work that you're going to present as your own. That's the unethical part of it.
Well, I was going to say my feelings on this are really clear. I think this is not something that's going away. I think it's going to be more immersed in our daily lives and those of the students that we teach.
Mhm.
And we need to get ahead of the game and we're already behind in some ways, teaching them how to leverage this appropriately, right? Like you said, this is something that can be an effective tool to help them generate ideas, to think about their own writing, to think about how the possibilities are really endless. And it's one of those technological advances that we hit. I still have the same conversation with people about my second or third grade math teacher who was like, "You'll never have a calculator in your pocket at all times." Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And it's something that's just it's going to stay around and it's going to continue to develop. And I think we have to really be responsive to that.
Yeah, there are folks, and I did some training this summer. There are folks who are skeptical, and I think they're skeptical because they're listening to the press,
Mhm.
and the press l- gets more attention when they talk about scary stuff, so or unethical stuff. That is an attention grabber, and that's part of the job of being in the press. It's not there to teach you how to use it as a tool. So
Mhm.
if you haven't gotten into this or know about it, get around some folks who are using it and learn the different ways in which it can be used as a tool for the work setting that you're in. But that was my second choice for software.
Yeah, well, and there's a whole tirade of us talking through ChatGPT in previous episodes and
Yeah,
unplugging our previous stuff a lot tonight. But
yeah.
um,
So teaching students, a couple of suggestions or tips that now you're teaching on a primarily online program.
mhm.
So you'll have different tips than maybe what I have.
Yeah, I think the first one I would give is that engagement is engagement. Whether it's in the classroom, it's online, it's synchronous, it's asynchronous. Those of you who teach online, my suggestion is to just think about that in terms of your courses. How are you engaging your students? Email communication, course announcements, videos, interactive activities. Do they have ways to meet with you synchronously? How are you spending that time? All of those things matter, and student success in courses, and there's plenty of research to support that their level of engagement, their connectedness to you as the faculty and the course material matters in terms of their ability to be successful in the course. So the more ways you can engage them, the better.
My tip would be my first tip would be listen to your students and be curious. This kind of came to me last night when I was teaching a course again, 12, 14 people in the class, and we were going around since many of them are new to the program, definitely at the doctoral level. And it's a doctoral and master's split class. And so I asked him to tell us a little bit about yourself. And I guess we could just do that blindly and get through all 14 folks. But there were a few things that students said that I became curious about. It's like I've done all my work in crisis settings and online, one student said. Essentially, that's what she said. And I was like, so first of all, you need to know that's how I started in the business, doing a hotline and being on a hotline for that purpose. And then I wanted to be more curious about what kinds of things she does with that. So it wasn't just, okay, thank you, let's go on to the next person. I think that gave her a little bit more ownership and a little bit more connection in a class than if we would have just gone around and done the activity. So my encouragement would be listen to your students, and when they say something, don't just don't just agree with the answer, but be curious about what the student said.
Right. Yeah. That time is not wasted.
Yeah.
That time to connect and for them to feel comfortable and safe. My next suggestion, specifically around online teaching, I'm going to try and be as politically correct as I can. Review your courses. One of my tasks as a graduate assistant, so many years ago, was to take overhead slides. Overhead, they were like clear sheets that they would put on the overhead lamp. And I know there's people who might listen who've never seen those before, and move those to scan them in and put them on a PowerPoint. So when I finished that project, I asked the faculty, I said, hey, do you want me to update any of the information that's in here? And they were like, no, it's all still good. I just don't have a projector anymore. And it hit me. And, sometimes creating courses online and teaching from those, it's a labor of love, right? You pay a lot up front to get that
Yeah.
course ready and prepared and that content. And it's a lot of work to revise it. The field changes. These textbooks change, the needs of your students change, and it can be really tempting to just continue to run into these courses and say, yeah, this is a really nice piece of work here, but it doesn't stay that way forever. So really be careful about what you're using. Ensure that students are really getting that quality out of your courses and update them regularly.
Yeah, that's really true. Thinking about having to go back and look at what you had put together for material when teaching an online course, you could easily just kind of sit and let it ride without making the changes that are necessary. I think I taught psychopathology online, and when we switched over DSMs, that was a whole new course prep, because it meant all of the material that I had where I'd been making reference to the previous DSM. If I left that up there, it would be seen as being obsolete. Or when was the last time this guy, did this? We can tell now it's dated.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, my final suggestion is a question that somebody asked me that was ultimately about teaching. And the question is, why are we meeting like this? And you break down each one of those words. Why are we meeting and like this? So when you think of it in terms of terrestrial classes where students come in. They come in from, in our case, all over the state to come in for an evening for 2 hours. And you have to ask yourself, if all I'm doing is presenting PowerPoint slides to them, they don't need to be here necessarily for that to happen. It doesn't have to be a shared experience of watching me lecture. The PowerPoints that they could get online, they could listen to at their own pace, they could ask questions if they wanted to. So thinking about that and using that question, it's the idea of seriously thinking about what can you do in a classroom where everybody, in my case, is physically present that you can't do any other way. And that means I have to shift my teaching. I can't do an hour of PowerPoints, a break, and then an hour of PowerPoints anymore. It means those things should be online. I should have pre-prepped them. It's going to take a lot of work for me to get them up there, but they'll get up there. And then if we are forced to be in the same room, we need to think of something that we can do that's interactive, that requires us to be in the same room and makes it more convenient by being in the same room to do it. So think about that in terms of your teaching and in terms of the challenges you're placed for with your students. Because I know there are students who are sitting in classrooms that have driven 2 hours or an hour and a half to get here and are wondering, why is the professor lecturing on a PowerPoint when I can get this online?
Well, and listen, even when I teach synchronously, I'm not lecturing. I'm not wasting that. That gets posted in a course or in a course announcements or somewhere for them to
Yeah.
watch. They can listen to me like they listen to a podcast, or watch a video on YouTube. I spend that time getting them to engage with me and with one another around things that have them apply the material,
Right.
and it's just pedagogy, right? They use that
Mm.
time effectively. We only have so much time together to do these things, and there's plenty that needs to be done.
Yeah, but there's also so much that doesn't need to be done while we're sitting in the same room together.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah.
It's a little convenient. I mean, if you got those 20 hours of lectures that are already on PowerPoint, it's easy for you because particularly if you presented them a gazillion times already in previous classes, but it doesn't do anything for the student's learning environment. So
And selfishly, it's not any fun,
yeah.
right? I mean, I don't know how many times you can lecture on like theories. I love theories, right? It's so much fun to teach, but
Mhm.
I talk about the history and Rogers and all that. Yeah, just watch that. Like, let's talk about what this looks like. Tell me what this means to you, to the process. Let's have some engagement and conversation. I don't know. I've never found lecturing to be fun. I like the engagement.
So those are our hardware tips, our software tips, and our teaching tips for the beginning of the semester. And I will put the links into particularly the hardware and software in the notes that will accompany the podcast. So if you have the podcast, look at the notes section, and you should have clickable links in there that will take you to the tech that we've been talking about. Is that it for you, Eric?
That's it for me.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on the Tech Savvy Professor. You can email us at the podtalknetwork@gmail.com, and we'll try and answer your question in the next podcast and get an answer for you. Look for us on Spotify, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, and all podcast servers. Our bumper music is from Philip Gross, Rast, from the Free Music Archive. Everything you need to know is at thepodtalk.net. Look for other shows like Circular Firing Squad and the new show that I'm doing on spatial computing called Vision Profiles. You can find it at thepodtalk.net. That's it for this episode. Thanks for subscribing to the Tech Savvy Professor.